To formulate compounds for a job.
And to go into the field with us.
No, I rarely go into the field, Mr. Cobb.
Well, we'd need you there to tailor compounds specific to our needs.
Which are?
Great depth.
A dream within a dream. 2 levels.
3.
Not possible. That many dreams within dreams is too unstable.
It is possible. You just have to add a sedative.
A powerful sedative. How many team members?
5.
6. The only way to know you've done the job is if I bring you with you.
There's no room for tourists on a job like this, Mr. Sato.
This time, it seems there is.
This, I think, is a good place to start. I use it every day.
What for?
Here, I'll show you. Perhaps you will not want to see.
After you.
Ten, 12, all connected, bloody hell.
They come every day to share the dream. You see? Very stable.
How long do they dream for?
3, 4 hours each day.
You dream, Tom?
With this compound, about 40 hours each and every day.
Why do they do it?
Tell him, Mr. Cobb.
After a while, it becomes the only way you can dream.
Do you still dream, Mr. Cobb?
They come here every day to sleep.
No. They come to be woken up. The dream has become the reality. Who are you to say otherwise?
Hi, I'm Dileep Rao, and you're listening to Monday Morning Critic.
So, man, there's a bunch of things I want to talk to you about before acting. First of which is all great people are born in 73. I think we can both appreciate that and agree with that. I was listening to an interview you did, I want to say maybe a year ago, and you were going off on Vic Fangio. You were going off. Like, I'm like, I can't wait to ask him about Nathaniel Hackett. Like, so we fast. But here's before you go into this, here's my thing with Denver, right? Their defense is fantastic. That trade looked great. I mean, it's easy to look back now and say, I can't figure out Denver. They got weapons everywhere. So, Dileep, we'll start with the Denver Broncos intro.
So here's the thing that I think is really important when you're talking about things like a fan. You can separate your emotions and how you feel about the state of things, and that's just venting and splenetic, and it is what you think, okay? If you're really going to have analysis, though, you have to, like you started saying, it is time-based, what you know in the moment, knowledge in the moment, the decision is made. That stuff really matters, right? I think Peyton, generally speaking, as a GM, has moment-to-moment made really good choices. He's drafted well. He's hired well. I think he thought the Hackett would get him Rodgers. I really do think he thought that. I don't know if that's a great idea, but I think that's what he thought, right? And it didn't happen. He trades for Wilson. He figures it'll work out. Now, there is blind spots. There are blind spots and all this stuff. Like, I think part of the problem is that Hackett is a very nice guy. He is sort of a gold-minted man of the NFL Insider Boys Club.
Right.
And he isn't really qualified for that job, right? So when it came down to doing that job, like really doing that job, he's not your man. He's not experienced enough and he hasn't done it. So that all bore itself out completely. Russell, it turns out, is really not the player he once was. And maybe, through the extraordinary work of Pete Carroll and his offense, through the years, they hid his defects a lot. And I think that he does have defects in his play. Like every player, I'm not saying others don't, but it's been underwhelming. It's really sad. I hated Fangio. I thought that he was just not qualified either. I think he's not a good head coach. But I don't think Hackett's even close to qualified to be a head coach. I think he has to go. I think they have to eat it. I personally think they should cut Russ and eat it in 2 years, blow out the cap hit and get on with it. I think you should pull the Band-Aid. I don't think there's a way to fix that. So that situation seems moribund. But then again, look, I'm an actor. They don't pay me to be GM. so what do I know, right? I'm just talking about it as a fan. But I think there are a lot of things you have to give Peyton credit for. The new ownership is here. You really do hope things. I mean, I think the real mistake here, the huge, catastrophic, franchise-killing mistake here is the extension. They prematurely gave him an extension before they saw him play, and I think that was probably the part that's going to damage the franchise for the short term.
Yeah, I mean, and I look like you said, they've drafted really well. Judy, they've got a lot of weapons,
Yeah.
you know, and
Sure.
defensively, they're as good as any defense in the NFL. You know,
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we can't lose Evero, and I think that's one of the tricky things. Also, is trying to sift wheat and chaff, and the wheat is Evero, and the chaff is Hackett. And how do you sift that correctly? Do you make Evero your head coach? I don't know if he's ready to be head coach yet. Like, it's a tricky thing. I think that hopefully he can stay for a couple years as a defensive coordinator. We can get a better head coach in, and we can see what we can do with Russ. I personally think you should cut him. I don't think there's anything there, but
yeah.
That's what it is.
In New England, we have a defensive coordinator as our offensive coordinator, and I'm not really happy with the way things are going in New England either. So I guess we're both miserable in our own little ways.
Well, at least you have the Belichick brain trust. They're like, yeah, I don't think Matt Patricia should be calling plays for you guys, and I don't think you had monkeying around and playing. They're playing like footloose and fancy free with the titles there. It doesn't matter who calls you out. Like Belichick was talking a lot of crap, but I think they've got some problems they have to figure out. But I think, look, you guys are competitive. Like that's a team that plays week in and week out. They're not in like a moribund state. The Broncos are in a moribund state.
Yeah. And the fact that you love football, I just love that. Like you're really passionate about it, and
it's great.
Man, so let's get into this wonderful acting career of yours.
Sure.
So med school, was that an easy choice to walk away from? When you?
To be clear, I wasn't as close as other people are. I was into it. I was going to go do that. Yeah.
Right.
You get these moments in your life where you choose and you make consequential choices. And I made a consequential choice that I thought was obvious to me. Looking back now, part of the joy of that is your ignorance when you make that choice, right? You make a little Lord Fauntleroy decision because your future is upon you.
Right.
You're still a young man and you still have, infinite avenues, you think. Or you do, because you're young. You don't have any burdens and responsibilities, or you also don't even know what your choices mean, right? And it was not hard for me to stop thinking about that because I think, for me, that was a path that could have, with some hard work, yielded a good future. But it was also in keeping with the traditional norm for my family and me and my ethnic culture. And what was easy for me in my upbringing was that kind of academic work, and the kind of to be a really great doctor, is to be beyond just being an excellent student and scientist and aptitudinal learner of what is in front of you. It is to also synthetically process what is happening to a living organism in front of you, with the knowledge being the template upon which how you see through it, right? And
right.
I think that would have been fun and challenging, but to become an actor in my generation, at least, that seemed like such an incredible challenge and very difficult. And I wanted that. I wanted it for myself. I heard my voice. I saw myself having something to contribute, and I really wasn't totally sure at the beginning what that was. Right? I just knew I loved doing it, and then as it became more manifest to me, it became more personal. And then it became, I think it has to be if it's going to be a lifelong passion or a lifelong career,
Right.
It became something of great interest to me beyond that.
Yeah, and it's the leap of faith that I find so amazing. Like you have to, I mean, and I hear everything you're saying, right? But like that leap of faith to walk away from something, to go into the unknown, to the abyss, like that is the part that actors, especially you, do that I just can't wrap my head around. It's like such an amazing, a gut call at the time, right? I'm going for it.
Yeah, you do have to have that faith and fortitude. It also, as I said, helps that you don't really know, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no one at that age that's fully cognizant of the price of what it is, how high a price you pay to be an artist, right?
Right.
If you really want to do it, I think at the level of inquiry, which I do, I think that has to be something that you can't be fully aware of, or you'd hesitate. It does take sort of jumping in with both feet. And look, I'll be honest with you, for me, acting is not easy, and I'm not necessarily to the manner born. My parents aren't in it. I didn't learn any like great aptitude for it when I was younger. I think I had a certain amount of like talent by the time I went to drama school. I kind of understood there were some things to my work that could become, of value. But it's all hard fought and very hard won. And from moment to moment, time to time, I'm never even sure exactly how good it is for what it's doing, but I know that the inquiry, right, at the point where you're starting to make art or trying to make art,
right,
you're involved in an inquiry into human truth. And that, to me, at least, is the place that I want to live my life and begin my work from always. So at least in that way, the correct, to me, beginning place is part of my natural setup now. So I feel a lot more capable of beginning that inquiry correctly. And of course, you as a craftsperson in any field, no matter what you do, if you spend enough time doing it, you'll gain a lot of tools and a lot of skill sets.
Yeah.
And the high bar that you're going to try to go for, even from back then when you're a kid and want to choose it, you're trying to explore the art of the world you live in and the life you've led, and be the truth teller about the human condition.
Yeah, that's well said. And for those listening and through my research, just reading about your life, listening to interviews, you are just a really bright guy. Like, I mean, the depth of detail that you go into with choices, with your answers, it's just remarkable. I would be remiss, and I know you've talked a little bit about this. I find this super impressive. The fact that you weren't on like Celebrity Jeopardy, you weren't like just a contestant.
I wasn't a celebrity.
No, dude, but what I'm saying is like I feel like you won. I feel like that's such a monumental achievement that you can't just say, yeah, I want, but like it's monumental for you for so many reasons. I'm impressed by it because of what it entails, right? You used the money to really help you. What was that experience like? And do you remember the final question you ended up winning on?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay.
I do remember. It was in 2002, so it was very current. It was a very a resident at the moment. He said that it was actors and roles, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I was leading going into final. And I believe it was John Voight played him on film in 2001, and John Turturro played him on television in 2002. And so I instantly knew it, and I was like, well, I'd already bet a ton, because I was like, if I don't get actors and roles, I don't deserve to win this, right? and the week had also, the shows of that day, that week's shows, that they shoot on the day, the payouts have been really high, so that tends to sometimes carry over, not all the time, but from show to show during the week, because it's all shot on the same day, you can feel the momentum to bet high for that payouts to be high. They love that, right? They want it to be successful and exciting. So I bet a ton, and I won a lot of money, and for me, that was like I always had a hand in like the trivia world and loving the trivia stuff, and I still go to the same pub quiz I've gone to for 20 some odd years. And it was kind of like a funny throwback to a previous me, right? The me that read the encyclopedia as a kid and that wanted to be Encyclopedia Brown, because I was like, I am Encyclopedia, I am Brown. No, but I wanted to, to be knowledgeable. And then, it's very funny about all that is by the time you get to Jeopardy and you get to some of these really serious pub quizzes, you run into like the NFL. Right?
Yeah.
You run into the people like Patrick Friel and Jerome Vered and Brad Rutter, Cliff Gallagher, people who are just unbelievable, Pam Mueller, people who are so unbelievably deep, and their resonant knowledge of the whole structure of knowing things is vibrating at a totally other level. And I'm good. I'm not in any way like, I'm not poo-pooing my game. I'm pretty good still.
Yeah.
Although with age, your recall goes, a little bit. But these people are from another planet. And so it's both humbling and fun. And I love having my hand in that world. It is something about being bright, but it's also about curiosity, right? Sure. I think being a trivia person, it can be often maligned, and not unfairly, that it's a collection of kind of geekery, or kind of like a subset. But those are my people, right? You come to that bar that we do the trivia at, it is a nerdy place on that night, and it's great. And the people who are there are comfortable, and they're comfortable to be themselves, and they're forthright about what they know and don't know, and the humility and the intensity of how well they know what they know, that'll always blow me away. So I always have a hand in that. I always love that. It changed my life. I won enough money to not have to take a tremendous amount of day job. I had a little bit of day job then, but I could also live off it like a writing fellowship. I could write screenplays and get a writing agent for a while, and like I could kind of put my hand in film and keep my career like survivable in Los Angeles, right? And the Jeopardy and the money from that championship made a huge difference in that way.
How close was the next appearance? Were you close to winning? Because don't you automatically come back?
The problem for me was I was the last show of my day. I was the Friday, and that often happens with LA people. They wait till the end because they can keep you and you just come back, whereas they have to keep them here in LA in a hotel. So they like to keep that. So I was the last show of my day, and if I had gone right away, because I was really in good rhythm with the buzzer, and I felt really good, I think I would have kept going. I don't know how many shows, but I think I would have probably won at least one more. But I had to come back in 2 weeks, and I had a migraine when I came back, and I couldn't read the board. And the whole thing for me on Jeopardy is reading the clue. Now, obviously, I'm not one of these people like Ken Jennings or the recent guy, I forgot his name, but they're just of another. They would have won 30, 40, 50, 60 shows. I might have won another one. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, it was unfortunate for me. I couldn't really read this, so it was very difficult for me to answer the questions. And I was in a lot of pain that day. And, no excuse making. I won one day and I'm proud of that. And the rest is gravy and I don't need it. So I was very, very happy. I lost the second day also, and that's a bummer. But, that's also life.
Yeah, 99% of us can't win that one, so that's amazing.
You haven't tried.
How'd you find Alex to be? Good guy?
Great, wonderful, funny, kind of. He has to put on the face of the guy who knows everything that's being asked, and he's very good at that. And so there's a shamelessness to that. That's kind of like you're like, whoa, like he acts like he knows what's on that paper, right? But that is the art of hosting a game show, right?
Yeah.
It's not the art of hosting a game show is not to be like self-regarding in a way that preserves you. It's to be self-regarding in a way that preserves the show.
Yeah.
So he's really was a wonderful man. He was a kind of eccentric fellow himself. If you ever saw that governor's debate he moderated, you're like, this guy's a very interesting dude himself.
Yeah.
But lovely, a lovely man. He is sorely missed in our community. He was beloved. If anyone in this committee can be beloved, this community can be beloved, not committee. Community can be beloved. It was Alex Trebek, and he was a touchstone for a lot of us. Those of us that went on the show, he'll always be a part of our having interacted with show business, he was a wonderful, wonderful dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really was pulling for LeVar Burton to get that. Now, with no disrespect to anybody now, but I just felt like he would have been a perfect, just fit right in, plug and play. He would have been awesome at that job.
Yeah, I think the thing that was underestimated in putting this host search together was what the host needs to do. And the host doesn't need to seem smart, although he did. He's very smart. Right. He doesn't need to seem like he's a virtuoso of trivia. He needs to feel like he's really good on camera, which LeVar is. LeVar's an actor, he's a fantastically talented actor, and he's also been such a part of education that I think he would have been a great fit. His reading rainbow background is more like this, right? And I would have been really, really excited for him to get it. Ken's fine. I think Ken's. I've met Ken. I've spoken with him several times. Ken's fine. It's great. I was pulling for Buzzy because I know him, and Buzzy's hilarious to me. Yeah, and he's also got a sense of like a wiseacre in him, and I wanted that for the show. But I think it's in good hands now. You can't get everything you want in that regard, and he's perfectly fine.
Yeah, well said. When you go to this pub for the trivia, do they know your background? Do they know what you do for a living? Do they?
Oh yeah, I was a struggling actor in doing a ton of auditioning and stage work. I've mostly been a stage actor most of my life. For years before I got the movies I got, and I got those movies 8 years into playing there. So everyone knew when it happened, like, oh, he's starting to do this stuff, right? And I was like, yeah, it's not going to come out for a long time. And, it was, they've all been there for me. They've all been wonderful to me. People come and go, but some people there have known me for the entire time.
Yeah. And I love how you answer that. Are you a big, into any universes like DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Star Trek? Are you into any of those?
Yeah, so when I grew up, I was a comic book nerd. I went to a place in Claremont that's where I went to high school in 8th grade, Claremont, California, called Comic Bookie. I would go in there and read the comics and buy some when I could afford them. And he was a great guy, that guy who ran that place. So yeah, I've been a DC guy. I liked Marvel. I liked the Magneto was my favorite always, which is weird, but I liked him even though he was the quote unquote villain because I thought that he was more reasonable, right? And I thought that he was more like philosophically interesting. Yeah. Whereas I thought Professor X was obviously very smart, and all the X-Men are amazing, but they're kind of like stock good guys, and Magneto was not stock anything. And so I liked him, but I think of the universes, Batman and the DC spoke more to me. The first superhero movie I ever saw was Superman with Christopher Reeve, and that set the standard for like goodness, and like grace, and a kind of, one of the greatest things about that legend is Schuster and Siegel wanting someone to protect them from the anti-Semitism and the extirpation of their people. They were feeling a threat of that, right? Not only the pogroms of history, but right then was World War II and the Holocaust, and to want to bring into being, to conjure, right, a super being who cannot be stopped, who will stand for good and for what's right. It's from a child's point of view almost, right? To give that a face and a voice and a theme, which John Williams did. It's truly one of the most beautiful movies, and I also really love that version of the character. So yeah, I'm a DC guy. Star Wars is gigantic for me. it was so influential in me that I'd seen it so many times before I even knew what acting really would be for me, like what doing that job would be. I've always wanted to be part of that world so much, but it's all about like the businesses and stuff. But I think that things change. You get older, things are made for new generations. You don't own them, right? They own them.
Right.
I wasn't a huge fan of the prequel trilogy. Some of it, there was parts of it that are all right, but I generally didn't care for it. I kind of like parts of this new sequel trilogy a little bit more. Like I liked some things that really turned on the youth centers in my imagination. I thought Andor was absolutely insanely good. Like I thought that was one of the best things I've seen. Yeah, that and Rogue One to me were like the original, right? And I think that like the fear of the Empire that Andor produced was how terrifying and Nazi-like, and if you read about the Third Reich, as awful as they are, one of the things that really is scary is just how grubby and power hungry and not. They were fearsome but stupid, and like kind of ugly, and like this has all that feel of like just revulsion, And I also love Diego Luna. I think he's such a fantastic actor, and that's such good work.
Yeah, it's somebody once described it as the Private Ryan of Saving Private Ryan of Star Wars movies, and I'm like, that's
really,
on description.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And Andor, I mean, that music, it just it hit me. The cinematography, it hit me like when I think one of the first episodes, he's reflecting on back when he was a kid. The camera pans back, and it's modern day. It's like, oh my god, I feel like I was gut punched. I was like, oh my god, like it gave me the feel.
To me, that's Tony Gilroy. Like that's to me, that's like you start to see like certain touchstones in the business you work in. And to me, Tony Gilroy and Michael Clayton, and then some of the Bourne stuff he did too, but especially Michael Clayton, you just saw a guy who's writing some of the finest work in film and can shoot and direct it if he needs to too. And being a showrunner on that show, he is the look and feel of that thing. And I know they have a very inclusive and diverse staff, and they have a lot of people working, writing in the writer's room and directors who did it, but you can feel his hands all over that. And that's, I think, the feels you're talking about, that's Tony Gilroy.
Yeah. And you mentioned the last three. I think they've aged a lot better than people give them credit for. My last question about this is, there's a lot of toxic fandom, I feel like, Dileep. Like, it's so over the top. I mean, a lot of the Star Wars characters went through it. DC has it. Yeah. Marvel has it. Like, where is it? Where's that line? I mean, as an actor, you're the perfect person to answer this. Somebody who loves, their craft, who is a fan of their craft. Like, when is it too much? When is it okay? You've crossed the line. Like, this is enough. I mean, obviously, harassing somebody is beyond.
Yeah, that's obvious, right? We're trying to find a more usable line. That's an obvious line, right?
That's right.
A more useful line. I think. Look, this is a complex thing. Its reasons are about identity and the time we live in now, where everyone's identity is supposed to be their politics, and everyone's supposed to fight for their identity as the most victimized group, and without being. I don't know, acknowledging the people who really are victims, like marginalized people who really genuinely don't have a chance, or people who've been harmed physically, like trans people, like for no reason other than people just want to do that, right?
Right.
So we're living in a time where everyone wants to be the righteous victim, and even take that away from the actual righteous victim. So I think part of what you have to realize in a fan, because the word comes from fanatic, right, is that your passion should not be measured in the lengths you're willing to go to that are socially transgressing to make your point. And we have to find a better space where people can say, hey, I passionately just don't like that,
Right.
Or
right.
like to say, I think instead of trying to find reasons and hateful things for why you don't want something, it might be easier and better if we just gave everyone kind of a pass to be like, I don't like it. And we can just know you for that, right? Like a lot of the poisonous shit that comes out is like, you ruined my childhood. Why is that woman in this thing? Why is that, Korean girl like a star in a Star Wars movie? Like, fuck, and you're like, okay, so what if you just said you don't like that because you're racist or sexist or misogynist? Or what if you just say you don't like it, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't have to have a reason like that, like somehow your childhood is sacred. Like, I'll just give this example, and I've said it before. I did a stage production of Sense and Sensibility, and I played Colonel Brandon. And Rickman has always been a hero to me. His work is some of the greatest work that's ever been done on stage or in front of a camera. And I got to play a part that Alan Rickman played. And someone did some research and said, you're the first person of color to play this part in America, ever. And I was like, well, I guess there haven't been that many versions of it, but yeah, it's kind of cool, right? And it was a kind of multicultural, inclusive, lots of people of color, diverse cast. And someone had written on some online thing like, why do they have to make this, diverse? This is not how I remember it. And so then I was speaking to someone about this, and she was like, I kind of understand that perspective. I'm like, yeah, I know what you do, but let me just say this: it's also our heritage, right?
Right.
Jane Austen is also my heritage as an English-speaking person, as a person of Indian, and my parents are from India when it was part of Britain, right?
Right.
So I have some British feeling in my life. Certainly, my organized brain has some of that in it. So this is my heritage too, and I want to play it, right? And I want the right to be up there and do it. And we have to be willing to be okay with other people also doing things that we want to do or we want to be a certain way. We're never going to own it. We can't.
Right.
If I'm a fan of Star Wars. I don't know Star Wars. I don't have any say as to who does what, right?
Yeah.
I just want to like it and root for it. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think when you're a fan, if you're addressing people in it personally and you're trying to blame them for being there, you should take a minute, and look in the mirror and be like, what am I doing? If you hate on someone because you don't think they're deserving of what they got, and we all do that, every person does that, then you need to ask yourself why that matters to you, right? These are personal questions. Can you live with other people's success? Can you live with other people being part of your dream too, right? They own it too. It's not just yours. And even to the degree it is yours, be humble in the small part of it that is yours. It's everyone else's as well. So
yeah, and
maybe that's useful. I don't know.
That's a great answer. And they are, because I was thinking about this, because they are just terrible to Brie Larson. She'll put something on her Instagram about just something like her working out or her doing, and they are just horrible human beings. It's a cesspool of people that it's gross.
Part of what you're describing there, though, I think is it's complicated, mismanaged transition of American masculinity that has been the dominant form of masculinity since the middle 20th century, right? It's a kind of post John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. It's a mismanagement of the transitions of these things that nothing holds, right? Everything changes. This is not some random time we live in. It's every period has had change. And I think part of it is they're seeing women like Brie Larson who are sexually desirable to the median person, right? Median straight man.
Right.
They find them desirable. They don't like them having an independent voice and power base of their own. They don't like them having opinions that don't include their desires or their that male gaze that I forget who said it. I think it's Camille Paglia. I can't remember who said it, the male gaze, right? That it's the orientation of how we look at the world. And as a man, it. It's not a fucking mystery. We all know that we have this power and had this power. And it wasn't right because it wasn't fair. Where's the female gaze? When has that been central? It's so rare that it sticks out, right? And I think that part of what the rage against people like Brie Larson is that someone who is talented and in things people care about is being given access and power that people want reserved for only the people they like it for. And then the automatic response to a woman, especially I think a attractive woman, right? Especially attractive white woman, is misogyny. If she was black, it would be racism and misogyny, right? So there's a kind of the cheap tropes. It's all kind of sadly obvious and stupid, but it also is human beings having to suffer through it. And because of social media, these things become acute and they actually are put into the face and body of the person they want to harm. They are harmed, right?
Right.
And we're all in an exacerbated state because of this. We haven't found a new social governance rule for how we behave in these spaces.
Right.
So it is ugly. It's awful. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I think we should all want more for ourselves and for other people to be treated better,
Yeah. And they sound so stupid because she's an Academy Award winner. She's a freaking wonderful actor.
Oh my God.
Portman, I think, took crap from the last Thor movie. It's she's another, I think, Academy Award winner or nominee.
She is.
Yes.
Multiple
so
nominee.
They're coming at people that have proven that. I mean, you don't have to prove your worth to win by winning Academy Award, but it's certainly a reflection of, hey, your argument or your hate towards these people looks idiotic.
Well, we're also in this situation where, if you remember Napster, a lot of people had to take the hits and kick the druff, right? They just take the stuff they wanted and just get and forever the CD business would rue the day they forced us to buy tracks we didn't want, right? That's sort of a thing. I think part of what we're also dealing with that's very similar to that is status grubbing, right? That there always was a kind of status granted to stars and people who get to be in front of the camera and have their face seen. There's a status to that, right? And like people right now in our era of where we live, there's like a certain amount of like distress people feel that others are being given something like status or privilege or recognition, maybe even, and they are not. And so the venom comes from, well, I'm nobody, so I get to be evil to you because you have what I want, right? And there's something that is lost it's lost to all of us, but it's lost in our time, which is the beautiful pleasure, dignity, and nobility of being an anonymous, normal person doing your life, right? Go to work, take care of your kids if you have them, or do a good job, and, we're now all caught up in this kind of pageantry and a form of display that it's unbecoming to being an adult, really.
Right.
And it's without restraint. The measure of an adult is their capacity for self-restraint.
Yeah. Well said. And speaking of actors and a great filmography, I'm talking to one now. What was your when you decided to pass on medical school, you wanted to dive into acting? Was there a moment that you really found yourself, like, what was the most meaningful moment moving forward where you either learned the craft or, I mean, with acting, it's a lot of little things. Like, it's something you learn in theater. It's something a coach, it's a mentor. Is there one that stands out for you? Like that was the difference maker for me. This is what really got the ball rolling as an actor. Do you feel like there's one moment, or you think it's a collective bunch, Dileep?
It's a collective bunch, but I'll give you, I think, a insight into my understanding of this process, right?
Okay.
And that is that there's something you have to learn about speaking, talking, listening, and speaking on impulse. And the impulse of, I'm talking to you, you say something, I speak off you, right? Like, this is normal how we talk. This is how people behave. But in a play, or later on in front of a camera, this has to become attuned to a finer degree, and you have to be able to obviously say the lines that way, right? And so learning the Meisner repetition, which is an acting training technique, which is about repetition of phrases, that it strips the text out of the impulse game of the kinetic form of what call and response is in human speech and human speaking. That, to me, activated the native part of me that was already starting to work, but I didn't have an understanding of, right? Right. And there's like moments like in acting that, especially when you're young and you kind of are learning, it's like, in Empire Strikes Back when Luke has Yoda balanced and the case balanced, and he's standing upside down and like he's trying to get it. And that's kind of what it's like. Like, you feel the things come on and they don't last and you can't control them. And that was the first time I think I learned how to control and understand that there's a craft to that call and response and being in the moment and producing your responses from a natural, organic place. That was huge to me. There's also this idea of like, the audience is so good, they're detecting what you're doing. So just do it, right? If you're trying to do something, they're going to see someone trying to do something, which if that's what your character's trying to do something, great. But if your character's supposed to be doing the thing you're trying to do, you're going to look like you're trying to do the thing you're supposed to be doing, right? And that is also a hugely insightful thing. I think, it's the other huge thing that comes, I think, when you've done it for a while, and some people are absolutely precocious in this way, but it took me a while, is that the highest bar in acting is, can you tell the truth about what you know? The things that make you afraid, vulnerable, shamed, in pain, the things that make you human, right? Can you put them into can you look ugly? Can you look silly? Can you take a risk in one take where you don't pull it off and it's bad acting, right? And then you circle back and you do it, and then you find the curve and you solve the problem, right? And can you be brave enough for that? And it's related to everything we know about as we get to be adults. Like, we're cathected when we're younger to try to be cool and unnoticed, and like we're going to be like masterful and apt and have high a highly skillful response to everything. But all that becomes very anodyne and plasticized, and there's no humanity in it. And when we get to do what we do, the insights that have been most meaningful to me are about how vulnerable can I be in this situation, and how can I lay for myself the bar of really experiencing this, as opposed to sketching it so that you understand. I transmit the story to you, but I have nothing on the line, right? That's the easier way to do it. Sometimes you have to do that because you can't get it, right? But the higher art, the deeper the lightning, right? The lightning is in really experiencing something that's very hard to do. So
Yeah, yeah. The Empire Strikes Back analogy, perfect. I got it. As soon as you said that,
great.
I got it.
That's good.
Yeah, you have a wonderful filmography. I just picked a couple: Inception, Drag Me to Hell, Avatar. I have to tell you, I haven't seen Avatar on purpose because I want to speak to you first. 2 weeks ago, I go to the movies. I try to go every weekend, and 2 weeks ago they have the. I'm a sucker for these things, so I bought my my Avatar cup. I want you to know that. And
That's great.
This is the best one. Hey, this is the best one. I love the tins they're coming out with now.
Oh yeah, I have a Force Awakens one that I have on my shelf.
Yeah, so I was like, I got to get it. But like, so James Cameron said Avatar came to him in a dream. And I feel like your work in these three particular is amazing. Do you feel like it was? Do you feel the pressure of like a Nolan set? Do you feel the pressure of a Cameron set? Like these are the best of the best. Like these are the Belichick's of of movie making. How do you get around that? How do you get around that?
Well, I think I was lucky that I was a little bit older. I was in my 20s. I was in my 30s, so that helps a little. So a little more maturity. Also, I think there's a part of you that, having done as much theater as I'd done that to that point, and after especially I did Avatar, which is my first movie ever, is that you learn so much about how to do your job, and you learn to let that machine inside you start running, even though part of you is like geeking out or freaking out, where you're like, I hope I don't let this person down, and also being honest, I told Jim early, I'm like, I'm afraid I'm gonna fuck up, basically, and like he's like, I'm right here looking in the camera, I'll tell you, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, wow, so I can trust you not to be the person I'm fearful of judging me. I can treat you, and this is the correct thing, like the resource to help me get the performance I want. Right. And that you want. And so I think that is like one of the most important things about filmmakers, because they're assembling it all the time. Once, usually when they've either written the script or they're with the script writer and doing that. Then when they are on set making the pieces, they're assembling it in their heads. And then when they edit it and they post it, they're fully assembling it to the vision they have. Right. And you want to be in full contact with that person, because that person's going to tell you a lot about how to get it right, or at least be aiming for the right spot. And to me, that is why that kind of a filmmaker is both terrifying in terms of you don't want to let them down, but they're also an extraordinary resource because they have a vision. Sam Raimi, Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, they have an unbelievably strong vision of what it's going to be. And they communicate it fairly well, or very well, right? And you can just put that right into your hopper, and it really helps. So in that way, I think, yes, of course, those sets are like, you look around, there's Academy Award winners and nominees and movie stars and beautiful people and people so talented they can make something work with no effort at all, seemingly no effort at all, but they're so good at it. And I went down and watched Stephen Lang do his first speech. You're not in Kansas anymore. That's that kind of that speech that he could wind up and make into art, right? I went down to watch him on my day off because I was like, I want to see a theater actor do film at that level. So I understand what my perimeters are. Like, how big can I be? How small should I be? Like, we're all kind of doing different things, but we're all related to each other in a palette like that, right? And so, you're constantly in awe of the people around you. Like, DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, there's Ken Watanabe, who's one of the most elegant men that's ever lived, right? Yeah. And you're just like, okay, so that's a movie star. Right? Yeah. And you're like, I guess I'm just going to try to do my job, But yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible privilege.
I can't believe more actors don't do that. I'm sure some do, but in your what you said about Stephen Lang, watching him perform and learning, to me, this is the ultimate masterclass. Why people would not take advantage of that time, it's insane to me. So I had a guest on from what was it? What's the movie with the Nolan movie? Interstellar. She was telling me about a rule. You could confirm this, I'm sure. Christopher Nolan has where no cell phones on set. Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, what idiot is bringing a cell phone to a Christopher Nolan set? This should be a learning experience from start to finish. Look, you
should never have your cell phone on the set if you can avoid it, especially if the director doesn't want you to have it, or the ADs. That's just to keep the continuity of being in the moment, It's really
Sure.
important, I think.
Sure.
But the other thing is this, man. I will say this is important to recognize. The way I just talked, the way you spoke about it, we're of the same ilk. We would probably
Yeah.
take advantage of the situation that way. Not everyone's like that. Not everyone's process is like that. For some people, they need to be in the worldview only of their character, so that the character interacts with everything anew, and that's how they get their impulse to work and to respond and live and be there. And they're incredible actors, but like they start to get corrupted if they see too much of it, right, outside of themselves. So like it's a difference in points of view and difference in like, I mean, then again, like, you know, also how much does Sigourney Weaver need to go down and watch me do something, or Stephen Lang, right? She's got it. She's good.
Right.
She's an A-level talent and a superstar, incredible actor, has been for the bulk of her entire life. So, you know, I don't know how much she needs to do that. So like, you know, I understand what you're saying, but like, I also understand people are different.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. How would you compare Cameron and Christopher Nolan when it comes to stuff? We see the final product, so I know how that works. Like I know how their filmmaking works. How do you see those two? You said about Cameron seems very approachable. You know, the way he kind of talked to you is reassuring, because it's like, you know, it's a very relaxed kind of reassuring way he goes about his process. How do the two compare with each other as far as the stuff that we don't see?
Well, they're both incredibly articulate, and they can both tell you exactly what is going on, how to make it work. I think that, you know, it's interesting because Chris is kind of more, he's more intellectually sort of interested in talking in certain ways, whereas Jim is super practical. His genius is in how he sees it at the end. He doesn't need to talk to you. He's obviously super smart, and he can talk to you in $10 words all day if he wants, but he's not super interested in that all the time. Sometimes it's just like, nudge it this way, do that, and but do that thing you were doing, include that, right? Both those guys are very interested in what you bring to it, and what I've brought to different things in both those projects. You know, both the Jim's movies and in Inception. Sometimes they're sort of like, they should be anyway, in my opinion, derived of what's on the screenplay, but it's also kind of three-dimensionalized and brought into living life by what comes through this instrument and this idea of the character.
Right.
They're both really sensitive to like that, when the thing they see is working, and they detect it very early when the thing is alive, and they usher that into the work. I think Chris is a lot more he's sort of, how do I put this? I feel like age-wise, since we're kind of closer in age, you know, right?
Yeah.
That there's a kind of like, you're working with your big brother when you're working with him, even though he's the boss, and don't ever mistake that not to be true, because he is.
Right.
With Jim, it's more like you're working with a master that you've known when you were younger. So just in terms of like my approachability with him, it's more like I'm looking up to someone who's been there longer, you know, and I've seen more of his work and stuff. But, you know, like these guys they're that good. It's like more what they're like, you know. Their differences aren't that important. They're personal, who they are personally. But like those guys are so talented. Raimi too. Like they're so gifted beyond words that you're like, their similarities are they all know what they're shooting. They know exactly what they're shooting to. They're shooting to the cut in their head all the time, and that is how you know that that's a filmmaker and not someone who's making television, right?
Yeah, and I remember the first time. And I'm just going to touch on Avatar, then Inception, and thank you for all this time, by the way.
Sure,
I really appreciate this.
No
so you get the role Avatar. It's your first, I would say, big role.
It's my first role.
Yeah,
in front of the camera.
So I kind of already asked you this, but like the fact that you get this role as your first, it's like going to the Super Bowl as your first year as a quarterback. Like it's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
Hail Mary, I guess you could say. I was blown away by it. Are you part of the franchise moving forward? I mean, I don't want you to say something you can't, but like, I
can't say any more than the fact that I have worked on 2 and 3 so far, and those are the movies that have been made. 2's out now, obviously.
Yeah.
And 3 comes in 2 years. So I have done my work on both those pictures. I am, for better or worse, part of the whole group that does all that. But, small parts of these movies, but super grateful to Jim and to John Landau on the cast and crew for all the incredible work they do, down to the, every single person who puts in a day. And many people put in thousands of days, right, on all these movies. And just have to be so thankful, grateful. Disney, Fox, making the movies, Jim and John protecting Jim's vision and getting it right. And when you see the new one, you'll see like he's doing something particular, and he's spending all that money to make a great cinema theater experience, not a home movie, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that's where movies should be seen. I have to say, it's just the first one caught me off guard, right? We talked about earlier about
Yeah.
Andor and the emotional feels. I remember after the first Avatar go around, I was like, "That's a gut punch too. That's a really emotional." Because I'm thinking about other things. Like it got me thinking about like Native Americans. It got me thinking like on a lot of different levels. And,
Yeah.
and believe me, I'm not even half as bright as you are, but like it did get me thinking, right? And I don't know. There's so much to this, and the fact that this came from James's vision, it speaks volumes about everybody. The cast. You mentioned Steven. I mean, he really sets up that villain role beautifully.
Jesus, he's so great.
Yeah, I mean, I was scared of it. And I had nothing to do with the movie. Like, I'm like, what the? Like, no joke. What can people? I'm going to see it this weekend. What can people expect from the new Avatar?
I think it's deeper. It's richer. It's visually, you know, it's the finest visual picture made in the last 25 to 30 years, I think.
Yeah.
I think there's probably nothing like it that's ever been seen. It will take you to a place that's hypnotically like a living dream. But I think the biggest thing that's in this movie is just the feels. Like I think the vibe of it, the feeling, the emotional reality of like this family and what happens. You stop thinking about them as like Na'vi, and you start thinking about them as a human family almost, right? And
right.
You there's especially between that second generation and their parents, you know, Neytiri and Jake and their children, that whole group of children they've somehow assembled in our parenting. There is a lot, and Jim he can turn a quick plot moment where your heart just goes in a blender. You're like, oh my god, like, you know, and that feel, the ability to produce that kind of emotion. Yeah, I wept. I wept through it several times. Sometimes for just sheer beauty, but sometimes just what's happening is so emotional. People should expect to be moved and to love it, and I think everyone who sees it loved it. So, for not everyone, obviously, people don't, but most people I know that have seen it have absolutely loved it. So,
yeah, and when watching a movie with an audience, I mean, doesn't that make it so much better? Like it's like feel everyone's emotional, everyone's cheering. Like to me, it's like attending a game, right? But it's that same like you're all in it for the same reasons, right?
We're social animals, you know. We do things in groups. The very first version of what we're talking about right now, and what we're doing right now, where people around a fire going, "I'm going to tell a story," right? And so, like, that's a human trait. We're evolved to be that way. It's better to be in a group and watch something than be by yourself.
Yeah. And I wanted to end with talking about Inception. I have to say, I almost feel like it's so weird. Inception, Avatar, it's to the same degree. But if you took Inception's score, Hans Zimmer's score, if you took that score, that's like a classic in itself. Like, I mean, Time is one of the most iconic tracks that come out maybe ever. I mean, I've been listening to that on a loop, knowing we were going to speak, and it's just like it's just so powerful. And I don't know, the cinematography, everything with Inception, you play a huge role, right? And it's funny because it's a vital role. There was somebody put on Reddit the other day, not the other day, I saw it the other day, you giving the finger in the van. Do you remember that? Like they said,
oh yeah.
I thought it was one of the, I've watched this movie hundreds of times. Like I totally forgot that. Like it's a classic moment from a classic film.
Yeah. I loved doing that. That was like, you know, I got to do like on the low level, nothing complicated, but I got to a lot of the low level driving of the van stunts and like, you know, moving it around so that I would be actually in the picture, so it's practical.
Right.
And because Chris loves that, and so there was a lot of days with me just driving the van, either with the cast or just me by myself and the stunt team and Chris and Wally, and just, you know, doing that over and over and over again. And it's, you know, that day especially was just like there's all this rain. It's on Terminal Island where, like, you know, there's a bridge it's a graded bridge, so there's like, you can see right through the water, but it's like a steel grate, so it's supporting everything. And it was an extraordinary day. I remember doing that. It's like it's a bit of fun, and you know, I when I first got the part, Chris was like, I think you're going to be the one bringing the humor to this movie because there's not a lot of it, but I'm going to expect you to do it, right? And I was like, yeah, duly noted. And he was like, have you ever seen Top Cappy? I'd actually just seen it that week. And I'm like, are you kidding? I just rented it, you know? And he's like, I think I would like you to kind of think about Peter Ustinov in that movie. And I was like, okay, so you want me to get bigger, right? And he's like, yes. And I was like, okay, great.
Yeah. You know, I've heard you talk about him on multiple occasions, but what makes Leo special? I know what makes him special. I see it from the outside. Getting to know him as a person and as an actor, what makes him so special?
I think that he's just one of the most talented, hardworking dudes. And those two things in that person, when you're that good and you're that talented and work that hard, it makes him like the captain of the acting department, right? He's like, he's giving it everything. And I would do it anyway, but it just makes it feel a lot more like you could go the extra mile, right? Because that guy's going the extra mile.
Yeah.
He's also super generous as a person. He's super friendly, and he's, as a performer, he makes you better, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a grace to his work that I really like. I think he can do impossible things and make them look easy, like I was saying earlier. And I think that's the mark of, you know, some of the best there are. I think he's the best actor of our generation, at least in film for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, hard to argue that. And Chris wanted you playing Yusuf, not as a drug dealer, right? That was key to you getting the part. And that's a great story you've told before. But the idea that how you approached it to Chris, how Chris saw you portray this, I think that's huge. It's a testament to you and to what Nolan wants, right?
I think I agree with that, and I think Chris has really good taste.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, you know, what this person would be like. But to me, you know, it's not very easy to do this, and sometimes it's harder than others. But at least in this instance, it seemed kind of clear to me that, like, the more interesting choice with this character was that he was an experimenter, and that he was at the fringes of what was socially and ethically acceptable in his field. That he was a more complex and alloyed figure of both kind of a righteous, almost like a libertarian, let me loose to do what I want because the research is so important kind of thing.
Right.
And at the same time, disappointed by, like, the fact that he, to make it personally interesting, when he was disappointed he was not, like, more famous or more accorded a place for the work he'd done, and therefore he kind of moved away to where he could do the work in secret and maybe not be as beloved or as credited, but that he would have a freedom, but also feel a disappointment. Because I think it's important to have a secret and have a wound in the character like that.
Right.
And so that's why I think later on, when you see that Cobb promised him his share, if he would help him go deeper, right, and go further into the dream, that he was amenable to that. That he's vulnerable to that. That has to come from a place of being, to me, wounded, and that your need for something can get transduced into something else. And so that's why I did that. And so I was like, yeah, he has to be someone who's, every single character to me has a purity and then a corruption, right? Unless you're Galadriel or something. And even then you might by the end. But you have to have a certain amount of, like, real humility about their pain. And also that no one is interesting if they're somehow just twirling a mustache, right? I thought Yusuf was, like, a good team member, but I don't know that he's, like, ethically totally reliable. And that's I find that interesting to play that, right? Like, and but at the end of the day, he's gonna do the right thing and he's got your back, right? 100%. Yeah. But that he's also, I also like playing characters that are not adroit in all circumstances. He's not a particularly action-packed dude. And so I made sure the gestures of his being and how he held the case and, like, how he's sitting there in the rain, like, that it was all kind of less easily and skilled deployed. His behavior is less skillfully deployed than when he's sitting in his office and meeting them all, right? I needed some contrast there for myself. So that's, you know.
Let me ask you, in the basement scene, the people looking forward to their dreams, are they addicts?
You know, I don't know the language of that diagnosis well enough to be judgy about that. I think they're bordering on it. Like, I think if not, they're bordering. I think that if addiction, and I don't know if these definitions are even modern anymore, but if addiction is, like, the use or abuse of a substance or a process to the detriment of your everyday life, like it affects your life, right? That I think the fact that they're going down their days at a time, you know, the image I always had of that when I read that was when Holmes would disappear into the opium dens, right, between cases, because he would get depressed and he couldn't handle, like, normal life, and he wanted to just be a high on opium, right, which is what he's like doing OxyContin basically, right? I find that, you know, I found that image sort of compelling, and that if you want to escape into this dream world. And then, you know, what's his name? Earl Cameron, the actor, he's like, how were you to judge them, right? And you're like, yeah, we all have if that was possible, people would be doing like crazy. It'd be a huge problem, because if you can delude yourself and go to a place of slight delusion, I think you can live a short-term happier life, but long-term disaster. Because you could just be in what pleases you, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. What a well-answered question. Let me ask you this. Yusuf, he's very similar to Morpheus from The Matrix to me. Not very, but there's similarities, I should say.
Sure.
Do you see that too a little bit?
I've never actually thought of that way, but now you say it, surely. Yeah. There's a certain amount of like authority over the journey and the guide. Like he has some of that, right? But I also think Yusuf, to Chris's credit as a writer, Yusuf has a part to play in opening certain doors, but then he lets the characters that go through those doors, including Yusuf, have their own versions of their journey that's not as stipulated as like a kind of Morpheus. To me is more like a Gandalf figure,
Yeah.
where it's like I know the lay of this land better than you, but I also have faith that you'll do what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think Yusuf is a little more like a code breaker or something. He's like a guy who's like there to open certain doors and make certain things possible. And there's also, there's some really fun stuff we got to do with Joseph and me and Tom, and like just like the group dynamics of like being on a team, like a heist team, right? And that stuff is just joyful, just to be one of the many characters in there, and the delight he takes in having made the drug, and like the there's a kind of a theme that goes through that character. I always think it was constructed by me deliberately, but it's in just little tiny places where it's like he's not quite part of everything in certain ways, and he just wants a little bit of like, hey, I'm doing great stuff here, right, guys? And there's a kind of it's goofy and it's human and it's fun, and I like doing that.
Yeah, was Nolan in the van during some of those scenes?
Oh, yeah.
Is he?
Always.
That's awesome. Like when he's doing that, is he giving direction? Is he like, what is he? Obviously, he's a director, but like, what is he telling you?
Sometimes it's like as little as I just do it, and we got it in one, and he's like, that's it, and like the moment where I made the gag where I was like, did you see that? And like everyone's asleep, right? And so I made that up, right? And I was like, I think he's like, do you have something for this? Like, yeah. I'd been working on my trailer on it, and I was like, I think this is it. And so I did it, and we got it at one. He's like, that's it, cut it. And I was like, oh, that's it. So he's like, no, he's like, no, I'm happy, I'm fine, just stop, it's good, right? and other times he's like, like he'll be like, careful here, drive a little faster, slower, right? Can you see out the front? No. Okay, well, don't go too fast then. It's a lot of that. So like, he's very practical, but he's also super. He's there. He's always there. While he's in the corner with the camera like in my face, and I'm like looking around hurriedly, and he's what's great about Chris. I'll tell you that it's true of all of them, but it's in that movie particularly, because there's a lot of it because it's very practical. Is that anytime there's a stunt happening, like where they've rigged a motorcycle to, as the van moves, it'll draw the motorcycle on a rope closer so the collision happens exactly where the camera's set, right?
Yeah.
He will explain that to you in absolute detail, as with Jim or anyone else, but like he will make sure you understand it, and that the stunt guy, Tom Sturgis, was with us going, yeah, this is what it is. So it's very, very clear, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and he pulls no punches. I guess in Oppenheimer, he really created the explosion himself. Like the explosion isn't like CGI or anything. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like that's Nolan, man. He is like he's old.
I'm just glad it's not an actual fission explosion.
Two more questions. Thank you. One of which is, how cool is it to be on that movie poster? I have some of it here. How cool is it to be on that Inception?
Oh, there's a funny story about that. So I got to, because I had a friend who was in the Warner Brothers marketing department, friend of a friend, and she works in there. And they made a special, like, I'm not high enough on the list of people that were your team seeing the marketing is important to your brand, because I don't have a brand. I didn't then, I don't now, right? But she was like, we're going to give you the same treatment. So I got to go in and see all the stuff, right? And so I saw the trailers, and I saw and it was like, just like, it's like being a movie star for a second. And then they showed me the poster, and I was like, oh my God, right? And then that next week was the first screening for the cast. The effects weren't even totally done yet. We were just seeing sort of the assembly and some of the work that Chris had done just to show us, right? And so I went in, and I'm like, obviously, like, Chris decides what's on everything, right? Like Chris is the guy. And I walk in, I'm like, and I hug him, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm on the poster. I'm so surprised. And he goes, and he goes, can I tell you I'm surprised you're on the poster? Which is, I was always like, oh, but then obviously I realized later on, I was like, oh, I don't think Warner Brothers foisted that on him. I'm sure you chose it.
Yeah.
But
please,
it was.
Please tell me you own a copy of it.
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, good, excellent. So I think his most underrated movie is Insomnia. I think that's so under the radar. Nolan's movie. I think it's beautiful. I mean, sometimes I forget he directed it, right? Because he's got so many projects. What's your favorite Nolan? What's your favorite Nolan work?
The Prestige.
Yeah. That's a genius movie too. I mean, and it's hard because
so good.
Yeah, and you didn't have to think about it. It is one of the more underrated movies of his. I feel it. I mean, people that see it love it, but like I feel like it's because he's done so much. It's often, and he's directed the three best outside of the original Superman. The three he directed are the best for my money comic book movies ever. I mean,
yeah, I think that's probably right. Although I think Spider-Man 2, Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is very.
That's pretty damn good. Yes,
that's a very high bar for me in terms of like what you can accomplish in a movie like that. I think The Dark Knight is the best superhero film I've ever seen.
Yes.
You know, and I think Batman Begins is really up there too. Like I think that's a fantastic film, and it's spooky and weird, and when he does the breathe and he breathes in that drug, and then they have this camera effect where like the room is kind of like doing this shit where like the camera's shaking, and you're like, I'll tell you, I saw that movie in the theater in 2005 when it came out, and there was a movie theater in the building my sister was living in New York at the time. She was between undergrad and grad doing a residency at some think tank. She's an economist, and I saw that movie, and it's 05, and it just done a play, and I was visiting her, and I was like, it was so funny. I mean, it makes no difference, but I was walking through the lobby out of it, and I was like, I vowed that I'm going to work with that director one day. And
wow.
I was like, I promised it to myself, and then, I had never even been in front of a camera to any merit at that point. And I thought that, and what the hell? Like, life has a funny way of just turning out. And, I'm very proud of that movie that we made together. My favorite film is The Prestige, though.
Yeah, when in the original Batman Begins, when I think it's Batman Begins, where he rides off and Gordon is with his son, and he's like, "Where's he going?" But he goes, and Gordon says, and he goes, but he didn't do anything wrong. Like that whole scene, I'm just like, like I don't know. Nolan's got a knack for that. What is around the corner for you? Is there anything you wanted to throw out there?
Nothing really. I mean, just please go see Avatar 2. I'm in it a little bit here and there, but more importantly, the movie's great. I'm just, like any working actor, next job is the next job. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, man, I'm a fan, and thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate every second.
You're very welcome, man. It's good to see you.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also connect with Monday Morning Critic on Instagram and Facebook, MDM Critic on Twitter, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. All episodes available, www.mmcpodcast.com.